Well, hello everybody. I was going to say it's good to see you. Who would have thought back in 12 months ago or less we'd be meeting in this way? I seem to have to spend a lot of my time doing Zoom meetings, often Monday to Thursday all day long, and I'm sure there's going to be some sort of, in years to come, there's going to be some sort of I'm going to say illness, perhaps illness is the wrong word, but I think there's going to be some effect that when we actually see people face to face, we're going to look at them and say, have you muted or are you unmuted? Apparently the most popular word at the moment is, hey, you're muted. So it's sad really that we have to meet in this way. I was talking to Cloella Benjamin, you might have heard of. She used to do play school, and she was telling me that she did a Zoom meeting last week with 10,000 school children. 10,000 school children. Imagine those poor kids having to sort of sit there in front of a screen. I wouldn't enjoy that at all. I don't suppose they particularly enjoyed it either. I just want to say a little bit about myself before I start. I obviously was involved in Liverpool politics for a time, quite a long time actually, and ran the Liverpool City Council, or was leader of, I shouldn't say ran, was leader of Liverpool City Council before we had elected mayors for 8 years. I, at the same time, was a teacher in local schools. Obviously, they couldn't be in Liverpool. And my last school, of which I was head, was in Hale Wood. I was there for 15 years. And I found that really important for me, that not only was I able to be a local politician, but I was also able to keep a job. And it was important because I think there's a danger that politicians always get full of themselves. And I found that by going into the staff room, if I'd done something stupid or daft or said the wrong thing, the staff would certainly, stick a big pin in me and bring me down to earth. And conversely, when I felt quite sort of lonely or upset about something, they'd pull you up and cheer you up. So I thought that was really important for me as a politician. And I had decided to retire when the telephone call came, and I remember I was seeing the assistant director of children's services for the local authority I worked for. And I didn't get particularly on well with this woman, and I told my school secretary to get out the best china and biscuits and all the rest. And she came in and sat down. And just as we were about to start the meeting, my school secretary burst in and said, Mr. Storey, it's Downing Street on the phone. But you could imagine the expression on her face as I said, excuse me, and was put through to the then Deputy Prime Minister, who asked about interest in becoming a working peer. And in a sense, the rest is history. And I don't know, I know this has happened to MPs as well as Lords. When I went to London, and before I now work virtually, but when I was working in the House of Lords, I would travel on a Monday and come back on a Thursday. And when I first went there, I was I'd never been I was lonely, and I'd never in my life been homesick before, and I was almost counting the days to come home. But then, like most things, you get to do things, and I was asked to be my party's spokesperson on children and young people and families, and now it's education in the House of Lords. And I just want to spend a few moments talking about how those young people, I think, have been probably have suffered disproportionately as a result of COVID. I mean, for the first lockdown for several months, they missed their schooling, and I know friends of mine whose children were at secondary school and about to do their GCSEs or about to go into the sixth form, and just lost all interest in schooling because they've been out of schooling for so long. So I think we've got real issues, not just the issues of the fact they've lost so many days, so many months of schooling, but also the social effect it's had on them as well. And there's some interesting research been carried out by Exeter University, which has shown that young people, particularly those poorer children, particularly those from disadvantaged backgrounds, have suffered the most. I mean, children from disadvantaged backgrounds were suffering, the most in schools in any case. If you, for example, came from a disadvantaged background and you struggled with your reading, unless it was sorted out, that gap would get wider and wider and wider as you went through school. Well, they're now suffering even more, and the research from Exeter has shown that, and in terms of days lost, and it's also shown that it's really major regional variations. So the north, for example, as you might have expected, has suffered far more than the south in terms of days lost to schooling or for schooling. And it's also found that, for example, and I have nothing against private schools, but I just wonder. So one of the things they found was that a private 3/4 of private schools got full days of education compared to only a third of pupils in state schools. Now, why is that? Why are private schools able to provide, almost a complete package of learning where state schools aren't? So it's an issue that's going to feed through into GCSEs. It's going to feed through into A levels. It's going to feed through into college places, in vocational education. It's going to feed through into university education, and we're already seeing that happen. And youth unemployment, for example, which was running at about 13.4%. has now risen to 17% and is still rising. And it will scar a generation. It will absolutely scar that generation of young people. And if you look, for example, at those young people, the 16 to 17-year-olds who are not in education, who are not in employment, who are not in training, and we're talking about 59,000 young people. What are we going to do about them? We can't just leave them. Now, government have come up with some reasonable schemes. So one of the things they've done is they have started a scheme called Kickstart. They've also put an extra £32 million into the National Careers Service. They've also developed a scheme for coaching those 16 to 17-year-old groups. Now, that's all good. But like most things in politics, governments, and this is of all political persuasions, they think they have a solution. And some of it is good, and some of it's okay, and some of it is, well, but they're not prepared then to listen to how particular schemes could work or be made better. So let's take the Kickstart scheme that's been introduced. And it's a good scheme. But what they didn't realise was that for 16 and 17-year-olds to be involved in the Kickstart scheme, you have to be on universal credit. Well, the vast majority of 16 and 17-year-olds aren't on universal credit. So that means they can't be involved in the Kickstart scheme. So that means that something like 48,000 young people cannot be involved in that scheme. They think, and when you tell them this, and you put written questions down or oral questions, you get the usual sort of government ministers' replies. They've quite rightly put extra money into the National Career Service, as I've just said. But actually, it needs to go locally. That money needs to go to local careers advice so that young people can have face-to-face or Zoom-to-Zoom careers advice, not in a national-based scheme, but in a local-based scheme. And that, again, when you explain that to them, you get the stalling answers. And then the final part of the sort of solution is to say, well, we're going to introduce coaching for young people. And again, for those 16, 17-year-olds who've been coaching, they have to be, it's run through Job Centre Plus. Well, again, the majority of them aren't claiming universal credit, so they're not involved with Job Centre Plus, so they don't take part. So what are the solutions that we should be doing? Well, we should, as I've said, provide support and funding for all age career support and guidance, and that has to be at a local level. I mentioned about Kickstart. the other thing we need to do is bridge that digital divide. A lot of young people, particularly mainly from disadvantaged backgrounds, do not have the access at home to a computer. They do not have and government are busy giving out computers, laptops to schools, okay? But then when they're at home, and they're at home a lot of the time, they don't have access to Wi-Fi. So we need to ensure that, again, those young people have that free subsidized broadband at home so that they can access those educational opportunities that are online. And we need specialist support for young people, especially those with additional barriers such as disabilities, those in care, young offenders, and and those with special educational needs. So I'm really saying a message of hope that we recognize the problem and hope that we do something about it. Now, Mary asked, how do we, if we look at our European, our neighbours, are there any lessons that we can learn from our European neighbours? Yes, there always are, and you can, but to learn those lessons, to understand, and they're not, they've got lessons to learn from us as well, but to learn those lessons, you have to have an open mind, you have to have an open heart. And currently, I'm afraid to say, we don't have that open mind, that open heart to learn lessons from other countries. We think, we are this country, this island, and we'll do it our way. And I think that's true of politicians generally. And if I, in my concluding sentence say, or concluding remarks say, if you look at the pandemic, wouldn't it have been so much better in dealing with the pandemic if government had put trust and faith into local leaders and worked with local leaders? I mean, it was an absolute disgrace that there wasn't the consultation with local leaders, with local mayors, with local politicians, and that should have taken place. And it would have been quite good. I mean, this is probably the worst disaster, is that the right phrase? The worst situation that we have faced as a country. Could the leaders of the political parties, could the government have not worked with opposition parties on dealing with the pandemic, rather than having this sort of, we know better and we're going to do it our way and that's the only way we're going to do it? It would have been so much more sensible to have done it in a collaborative way. And actually, when finally government wake up to that sort of collaborative way, you just have to look at how successful the mass testing pilot has been in Liverpool. Finally, Joe Anderson and a Conservative government, and Boris Johnson presumably, or Matt Hancock, reached out, and the results have been spectacular in Liverpool. I mean, you look at our infection rates. We were sort of over 400 per 100,000, and we're now down to nearly about to go under 100 per 100,000. And that's because of working together and saying we need to do it this way and understanding each other. Neither side has all the answers. Liverpool doesn't have all the answers. Central government doesn't. But by working together, you can understand each other and come to a successful conclusion. So if we can't do it, if we couldn't do it nationally, my hope of doing it across the European dimension is sadly, I'm afraid, I have no great hope of that happening. But today is a day to celebrate, isn't it? That a vaccine has been agreed, and hopefully this time, certainly come the spring, we hopefully will be meeting in the summer, we'll be meeting in person, and save up your Christmas treats for them. Thank you for listening to me.